What is going on, everybody? Welcome back again to The Haunted Beard. My name is Jake. Well, last night I watched a pretty wild movie, and I just figured I should probably make a video on this thing. I wanted to talk to you about it. So the movie I watched is called Dressed to Kill. Came out in 1980, was directed by Brian DePalma, and it was a pretty interesting watch, so let's talk about it. Now, Dressed to Kill is a murder mystery thriller that tells the story of a mysterious blonde woman who kills a psychiatrist patient and then goes after the high-class call girl who witnessed the murder. And that brief plot synopsis barely does it justice, because this movie is quite a little roller coaster ride that subverted my expectations multiple times, has some pretty solid twists and turns, and kept me guessing right up until just about the very end. Before I get into this too much, though, I am going to issue like a minor spoiler warning. I am going to be talking about some of the events of the film. However, I will refrain from giving away the ending of the movie. So, just wanted to make sure you're aware. Now, in the thumbnail I made for this video, I described this movie as a Hitchcockian Giallo slasher. And if that doesn't pique your interest, I don't know what will, because this movie has such a unique visual style to it, unlike anything that I think I've really quite ever seen before. So in terms of its Hitchcockian vibes, if you're familiar with the work of Alfred Hitchcock, Brian DePalma as a director was largely influenced by Hitchcock, and a lot of his films almost pay homage and have a lot of similarities to Hitchcock movies, and this one is no different. First off is the musical score. The score for this thing feels like it was taken right out of a Hitchcock movie. If you've seen The Man Who Knew Too Much or Vertigo or even a handful of others, it has very similar vibes. Just a very orchestral score, very kind of heightened, over the top, a lot of stringed instruments, and just kind of has that feel to it as well. Also, particularly this film, you can make some comparisons to Hitchcock's film Psycho in terms of how it handles some of the plot points and some of the similarities there. The way he handles the opening act of this film is very similar to the way Hitchcock handles the opening act of Psycho, and even going as so far as killing off who is seemingly the lead character in your movie. And so if you enjoy Alfred Hitchcock's films, I think there will definitely be something in Dressed to Kill that you will enjoy. This film also has some Giallo vibes, as it is a very stylistic and violent murder mystery crime thriller, and even some slasher vibes as well, as the killer in this movie is stalking their victims. And so you get a handful of those sequences of them stalking and following and spying on the victims. And so there's just a lot of unique and interesting things going on in this movie that make for a pretty compelling watch. As I mentioned a minute ago, this movie subverted my expectations a few times. The opening act in particular does not play like your typical traditional murder mystery thriller film at all. We're first introduced to Kate, who is played by Angie Dickinson, and she is a promiscuous woman who is not satisfied in her current married relationship, and so she is just kind of messing around, and we're following her. And then about 30 to 35 minutes in, she gets killed in an elevator in a really great scene. And so just how this movie handles that opening third, presenting itself not as a typical mystery thriller, and then killing who we think is our lead actor, it just really surprised me. I also mentioned just how stylistic this movie is, and there's just so many sequences that Brian De Palma brings just a unique approach and flavor to it that really stand out and make this thing set apart from other crime thrillers like this. I want to talk about a handful of those scenes in particular. First of all, there's a handful of scenes in this movie that are just dialogue free. And so it's just a really interesting approach there, because there's just a lot of visual storytelling, and there are a few times where multiple minutes go by in this film where there is just no dialogue, and it's just very quiet, and it's just an interesting approach. There's a particular sequence earlier on in the movie where Kate is at this museum, and I think it's like 9 or 10 minutes of screen time go by where there is no dialogue, and she is more or less kind of engaging in this sort of flirtatious interaction with another person in the museum. And just this whole sequence is just really interesting and different and unique, and really just stands out. Just the fact that there's no dialogue, the fact that he's able to kind of communicate sort of this almost, it's like this flirtatious dance in a way. Just the way that it's put together and edited together is just a really interesting sequence that I quite enjoyed. Also, the scene where Kate is killed on the elevator, and then Liz, who plays the call girl, is witness to it. Just the editing during that whole scene is just really well done. Just the suspense is there, and the kill is really good. Also, that's another scene that really stuck out for me. There's another scene where DePalma does a split screen where we are watching the psychiatrist, who's played by Michael Caine, on one side, and then we're watching Liz, the call girl, on the other side. And they are both having these phone conversations. And just the way he kind of mixed the audio and the sound together is just such a different and kind of unique approach to a scene where we're just kind of getting some information and learning a little bit about the characters, but it's just presented in such a different way that I really enjoyed it. There's another scene that takes place later on in the movie on a subway that I think is really good, as Liz is trying to escape the killer, and she gets onto the subway, and she's running away from these attackers while also trying to avoid the killer. And the movie just does some cool stuff with the lights, as the lights in the subway car keep flashing in and out, and it just kind of adds a heightened suspense to it, and just a really good scene. And then one other scene that I have to mention too that I really liked is it's really kind of the climax of the film, and I won't give away any specifics, but it's between two of our main characters, and they're just having a conversation, and it's just this very sort of flirtatious, seductive type conversation, but there's a storm happening outside, and every time a lightning strikes, you get just this really pretty sort of blue flash and this blue glow in the scene that just adds a nice visual element to it. So there's just a lot of sequences in this movie that I think are just really different and really, as I said, kind of set this film apart from other mystery thrillers. And finally, this movie surprised me in another way, in the fact that it talks about transgenderism, which is not something I expected, especially from a film that is over 40 years old. And so it's just kind of again, surprising and unexpected topic and approach that they sort of weave into the story of this movie that, again, I just did not expect at all. Also, too, I think another little bit of a connection there to Psycho as well. Not exactly the same, but some similarities. So, listen, overall, I had a pretty solid time with this movie. I think the story and the mystery element is there. It kept me guessing up until pretty much the very end. And so I think it's got a solid mystery at the core of it, but really the directing in this is just really solid, as Brian DePalma just pulls out all sorts of creativity and stylistic choices that really work for me and set this thing apart. So had a pretty good time with this thing overall, and I think my overall grade is probably going to be, I'm probably going to go like a 7.5 out of 10 with this thing. So I'm not going to call it like a masterpiece or anything like that, but it is a solid mystery thriller that I would definitely recommend to check out. So those are my thoughts on Dressed to Kill. Thank you once again for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Hit me up down in the comments, though, if you have seen this thing. Let me know your thoughts. Would love to hear from you. Also, too, if you like horror and thriller movie content, please hit that red subscribe button. I'd greatly appreciate it. So that's all I got. Thanks once again for watching. We'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.